Have you ever noticed how some people will speak from a place of deep authenticity or vulnerability, and when they do, they open the people around them to be more real and honest themselves? Or in the converse, do you ever notice how sometimes people who start speaking with a lot of ego and artifice and posturing, that it makes everybody around feel pretty disconnected? So even though I'm a minister, and maybe especially because I'm a minister, I've had to learn what it means to be real when I'm in my role as a minister in people's lives. People have so many preconceived notions about who a minister is. And it's tempting for those of us who are in the ministry to try to meet all of these lofty expectations. So I want to share a lesson that I learned early in my ministry here at All Souls this morning. It was back in 2000 that I was asked in my first weeks as minister of this church to speak to the Day Alliance. Now, the Day Alliance is the traditional women's alliance of the church, which goes back to the beginning of time. And it has among its ranks some of the most accomplished women of this congregation. These women have helped build this church and have, in some cases, even helped build this city. So when I arrived 15 years ago to become the senior minister, the Day Alliance leadership asked me to come before them and speak to them about my vision for the future of the church. Now, I was determined to impress these ladies with my vision and my intellect and my humor. And I was pretty sure that my success in the church would be determined in part by whether the Women's Alliance liked and respected me. So I don't remember really anything specific that I said. All I know is that I did not get invited back to speak to them for 4 years after that. But after 4 long, cold years in exile, I was finally invited back, and I really didn't want to mess it up again. I was explaining all this to my beloved coworker, Kathy Keith, at the time, and she said, "Just tell them what you just told me." And I said, "What? Tell them that the last time I stood before them, I was nervous and self-conscious and unsure of myself?" She said, "Yeah, it's true, right?" I said, "Sure, it's true, but heck, I'm the senior minister, for God's sakes. That doesn't sound very dignified." And Kathy just looked at me and she started laughing, which is what she would do whenever she could see that I was taking myself way too seriously. And so I tried it. I went to the meeting and I said, "I can't remember anything I said the last time that I was asked to speak to you, but I remember that I was really trying hard in hopes that you would like me." And I explained that at the time I was 32 years old. I'd been in Tulsa for only 3 weeks, and they were a group of very accomplished women who had built this church, and I was supposed to share my vision for the future. And I realize now that I should have been asking them questions rather than the other way around. What happened in the 4 years since I had talked to them was that they'd gone from being what seemed to me to be a slightly intimidating group of older women who I didn't know into being women who I cared deeply about, whose names I now knew very well, people who had spent time in my living room, who I'd spent time in many of their living rooms, sometimes even in hospital rooms. In quite a few cases, we were together holding hands during the death of someone they loved, or before they were wheeled into surgery. Even so, it was still a bit unnerving for me to just stand before them and speak that honestly to them. But what happened when I did was that we all immediately began to feel a lot closer. And even the woman who banned me from the podium for 4 years came up to me and gave me a big hug and smile afterward. About a month later, I was scheduled to give a big rah-rah speech to kick off a dinner for our church's stewardship drive for the year. The pledge chairs were counting on me to get this thing off to a really big, bold start. And it turned out, however, that I spent that whole day, most of that afternoon anyway, at the bedside of one of our members who was dying. Some of you might remember her. Her name was Bisser Barnett. She was one of the last 2 living original members of this congregation when I came. I'd grown very fond of her over the time I knew her, and I'd just come from spending all this time with her, realizing that it was probably the last time I would ever see her alive. And so here it was, 15 minutes before this kickoff dinner, and I was in my office, very teary, trying to pull myself together, trying to pull together a little speech that I could give. And Justin, who was our young adult minister at the time, he was probably 23 years old, he came in and wanted to see whether I was ready. And I explained to him my dilemma. And you know what he said? He said, well, just tell him what you just told me. To which I replied in my most condescending, you don't know what you're talking about, young man, voice, that he was crazy. This was a fundraiser. I needed to stir up a lot of positive energy and vision for the future of this church. And I told him that both his and my salaries were on the line. And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, I guess I better start typing up my resume then, which made me laugh and made me stop taking myself so seriously. That night, I gave the most depressing stewardship kickoff message I've ever delivered. Most of the members were well into their second Kleenex by the time I was done. And I remembered thinking to myself, this is either going to be the absolute worst or possibly the best kickoff we've ever had. It turned out to be one of our best. And it all came from me just being real. In the book, The Art of Possibility, Ben and Rosalind Zander tell a story about 2 prime ministers who were sitting in a room discussing the affairs of the state. Suddenly, a man burst in apoplectic with fury, shouting, stamping, banging his fist on the desk. The resident prime minister admonishes him. Peter, he says, kindly remember rule number 6. Whereupon Peter is instantly restored to complete calm, apologizes, and withdraws. The politicians return to their conversation, only to be interrupted again 20 minutes later by a hysterical woman gesticulating wildly with her hair flying. Again, the intruder is greeted with the words, Marie, please remember rule number 6. Complete calm descends once more, and she too withdraws with a bow and an apology. And when the scene is repeated for a 3rd time, the visiting prime minister addresses his colleague, my dear friend, I've seen many things in my life, but never anything as remarkable as this. Would you please be willing to share with me the secret of rule number 6? Very simple, replies the resident prime minister. Rule number 6 is, don't take yourself so darn seriously. The visitor responds, that is a fine rule. After a moment of pondering, he inquires, and what, may I ask, are the other rules? There aren't any other rules. Sometimes we all need to stop taking ourselves so darn seriously so that we can just show up and be who we are. We are all just lovely, imperfect people trying to make our way in the world, trying to connect with other people, do some good during our lifetime, have some dignity and meaning throughout our days. But often we become our own barriers to being real by taking ourselves too seriously or by just thinking we're supposed to be something we're not for other people. But these are strategies that we've developed from the time we were very young. In their book, the Zanders describe what they call the calculated self, which is the opposite of what they call the central self, or what I would call our real and authentic self. We each have both a central self, which is our core essence, our truth, It's just who we really are with no forethought or posturing or manipulation. And then we all have a calculated self, on the other hand, which is made up of all the strategies that we've built up throughout our lives to help us survive. We start developing strategies as small children before we even understand very much at all. We learn in our families when to talk, when to be quiet, how loud to talk, who to talk to get what. Throughout our lives, we are developing countless tactics for getting what we want and getting what we need. We learn quite early what it takes to survive in a competitive world. We compete for our parents' love, for the attention of teachers and friends, coworkers, customers, clients, even congregants. Fears of one kind or another cause most of us to spend much of our lives acting from our calculated self. Yet underneath all these tactics and all these strategies, there's the genuine self, which is caring and vulnerable and real and raw and honest and sacred. Jews and Christians, even Muslims, believe that we were created in the image of God, which means that we're good enough, just as we are. And we don't need to work to try to be something that we're not. In Buddhism, they talk about every person has within them a Buddha nature. The practices of Buddhism are not aimed to change a person into something different, but they're aimed to help people be reminded of who they really are. So in order to move from our calculated self to our genuine self, it begins with giving up our fear of needing to control the situation. Just showing up and being real. It requires trusting ourselves. It requires trusting others. It's really about having faith. Not faith in a traditional religious sense, but faith that I'm okay, I'm enough. If I meet this moment with my own humanity, that is all that is required of me. Some people have learned to play small because it draws people towards them. Some people have learned to be gruff because it keeps people away from them. Some people have learned never let others see you sweat or never admit you've made a mistake. We edit ourselves because we're afraid that we're going to be seen as too liberal or not liberal enough, too conservative or not conservative enough, too serious or not serious enough. It comes from a lifetime of learning how to survive. But it also comes from a lack of faith. Faith in our genuine reactions, our genuine interactions in the moment being enough. It's a learned way of trying to control how we appear to others that cuts us off from others and even from our true selves. In time, we start to forget even what we think or what we feel or what we want, because we spend so much of our lives trying to meet other people's expectations or what we think are their expectations, when ultimately what we should be expecting of each other is to be real and to be genuine. It's one reason why I love being around elderly people, because elderly folks, they don't really care. They're done pretending usually about who they are. They say, I don't have enough time left to waste my time trying to be someone I'm not. It's one reason that grandchildren particularly love their grandparents, because their parents are trying so hard to do and say all the right things to be a good parent, and the grandparents are usually much more relaxed and much more real. So as we begin a new year or a new season, as it were, as summer is coming to an end, I want to encourage you to let go of some of your own habits of trying to be in control. Trust yourself, have faith in the moment. And have faith in others, that they can see you, that they can meet you, that they can hold who you really are. It's about authenticity. And authenticity, I think, is one of the most attractive qualities in a person. I think in our world of highly manufactured political personalities and airbrushed magazine covers, authenticity has become the new currency. It's something that is becoming so rare that it's becoming even more valuable. when we drop down to be real with other people, when we take the risk to be our true self, most of the time people will join us in that place of authenticity. Often it just takes one person to just drop down and be real to help even a whole group of people to open up. It's something that we experience often in these soulful circle type groups that Dave is starting to lead and will be leading today. An example of it, 1:30, when somebody's willing to drop down and get real, not take themselves so seriously, be humble, and just open up. It just opens everybody up, and all of a sudden you feel it. We're having a real conversation. These are real people. I can let down my guard. I don't have to pretend to be something I'm not. And it's an act of faith. More than that, it's also an act of love of ourself, love of others. And it certainly helps if we don't take ourselves so seriously. So remember rule number 6, even if you forget the first 5. The world does not need more calculating, artificial, posturing people. We have plenty of those. What the world needs now are people willing to be real. Who knows what kind of world it could be if we care, if we share, if we're free. In the end, no one is really interested in our postures, in our pretense. No one enjoys us acting from a place of fear and scarcity, which is what we do when we calculate our interactions. What they really want from us is our heart, is our truth. Every day, may you feel more and more permission to be you. For those who believe in God, every day, may you have the confidence that you were created in the image of God. And to know that love is God, and God is love, so that you are created in love. And it is in being real that you are most lovable. I love you. Amen.
Thanks for tuning in online. We are so pleased with all the different people who have been tuning in from all over the country and all over the world to our ministry and what we're doing at All Souls here in Tulsa. If you have a chance to send me an email or connect with me in some way, let me know what you're finding, why you tune in, and what you're getting out of it. I would love to hear from you. I'm always pleased when I get messages from different people who tell me all kinds of things about the impact of All Souls Tulsa's ministry on them and their lives and their families. And if you get a chance to make a gift to support this ministry, to become a partner, we would love to partner with you and have you be a friend of the church and somebody who is actually supporting us to create this congregation and the world that we're trying to create together. You can be a part of it, and every gift of every amount makes a difference. We really appreciate your support.